The marvelous Miss Mabel.
Oh my gosh, we are actually live for episode 291 of the In the Tank podcast. We're going to be talking about Earth Day and COVID on episode 291. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and I am joined by Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing just great. Yesterday, two big things happened yesterday. One, my kitten, or well, not a kitten, 1-year-old cat, got her first kill in the garage. She took care of a chipmunk that was trespassing on our property. So that was pretty exciting. And now the cat is walking around like she owns the world. It's quite funny.
Oh, that's a coincidence. My 1-year-old baby did the same thing.
Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah, walking around like he owns the place now.
Yep.
It's
Oh, I thought you meant caught a chipmunk in his mouth.
Oh,
I was
no,
gonna
that
be
too.
Really impressed.
yeah, that too.
That too, yeah. Pretty fast crawler, that little guy. But secondly, I went to the DMV here in Illinois, in still COVID locked down Illinois, and it was a 2-hour nightmare. I had to stand in 5 different lines. When I finally got inside the DMV, there was a sign that says no cameras or video recording devices allowed, which I thought was actually pretty hilarious. And I think the reason why is that you don't take a picture or a video of what a nightmare it is to go to the DMV in Illinois under COVID. I stood in 5 different lines. You couldn't take any pictures. There were almost no chairs anywhere because everybody has to be 6 feet apart. Everybody's wearing masks. Actually, I did take a driving test again. I aced it, 28 correct answers in a row. So everybody in Illinois should be feel safe when I'm on the road now. But I just pulled my mask down a little bit so that I could breathe. And so that when I was breathing, the mask wasn't fogging up my glasses so I could read the stupid test on the computer. And I was immediately reprimanded to cover my face. There was nobody within 20 feet.
They took points off the test.
Oh, I know. I'm lucky they didn't. But there was nobody within 20 feet of me. And it felt like I was going into a government office in Romania in 1967. It was
we're not far removed from that.
Yeah. Not really.
So on if going to the DMV during non-COVID times is a 10 on the misery index, where would you have put your experience yesterday?
28.3.
Nice.
I'd put that.
Just slightly better than the ace that you got on that driver's test. Fantastic.
That's right. Yeah.
Also joining us, we have Nate Myers. He is the development coordinator here at the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Pretty good. Can't complain. It is a beautiful but cold Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, it was literally snowing in Illinois, or at least in our little parts here yesterday. So we're not quite spring yet, but I don't know. It's starting to trick us into thinking that it's there.
As a Southerner, it really confused me because it was like sunshiny and bright and like everything is like blooming in spring, but there were also snowflakes falling. So I did it. My brain didn't know how to process it.
Right.
It's funny how global warming isn't really happening as we get to Earth Day here in Illinois. If it's snowing in the middle of April, but
that's a good point.
Near the end of April.
That's a good point. Before we get to talking about Earth Day, because today is Earth Day, and we're going to celebrate it here. So I do have a question for you. This was a thought that I had. You could probably label under shower thoughts that I had yesterday, and it was about germaphobes. Okay, and people that are watching, put your comments in here too, because I'm curious about your answers out there. But germaphobes, are they extra on edge during COVID? Or are they like living their best lives because now generally everyone's acting more careful? Like society is giving them justification to act irrationally when it comes to germs. What do you think, Nate?
I don't know. I would probably say it's a mixed bag. I would think that some of them feel more comfortable now that everyone's wearing masks and washing their hands more and, doing all of that. But I'm sure there are others that are just even more freaked out. Like I have a friend back home that when COVID first hit, he nearly barricaded himself inside his house, and everyone kind of had to coax him out. So I think I really think it just depends on the person.
Nate, pull that mic a little bit closer to you, and Jim, what do you think? What do you think? You think it's more in one way or the other? Or do you think it's a mixed bag?
This is the greatest. COVID is the best thing that ever happened to germaphobes because everybody now has to be a germaphobe, or at least go through, germaphobe theater. And the science doesn't back this up. Like I said, at the DMV, there's nobody within 20 feet of me. I do not have COVID. I pulled the mask down just a little bit, just so I wouldn't fog up my reading glasses, and I was reprimanded. They said in the beginning that you had to wipe everything down. Remember, there was run on clean. Not just was there run on toilet paper, of course. Every time there's something that panics people, toilet paper goes right out of the stores. But we also started running out of Clorox wipes and disinfectant and all of that stuff. Well, we come to learn, 6-8 months later that, COVID doesn't really last very long on surfaces. It's nice to clean it, keep everything nice and clean, but you're not going to get COVID from touching a door handle. Like, you might get the cold, but you're not going to get COVID. And so, we have instituted into our society, all of these practices of germaphobes who, we have hand sanitizer everywhere. Even in your own office. And again, I had to laugh at this. I hadn't seen this in a while, but there was a woman on my drive to work today. There was a woman waiting to pull into the lane. She was by herself in an enormous white SUV wearing a mask while driving, all by herself in her car. So to her, I guess, if you want to wear a mask while you're driving by yourself, you have an issue with germs. You have an issue with that sort of stuff. And this is living your best life because, it's expected now that everybody has to stay away from each other. Dr. Fauci even said himself, St. Fauci, the great Dr. Fauci, he would actually like to go to a society in which we don't shake hands anymore. Shaking hands is a dangerous activity. Oh. So this is the mindset our country has now. It's not healthy mentally. I suppose maybe it's kind of healthy physically, but it's insane. And I really, really hope that we get back to a normal life one of these days, even though our betters, our government, and Dr. Fauci really never want us to go back to normal, because normal isn't what they want.
I heavily disagree with Fauci. I think we should do the opposite and go back to blood oath handshakes where everyone splits their palms and then shakes hands. I feel like that would just be a lot cooler.
Yeah, we got one comment here saying President Trump was a germaphobe and he didn't seem too freaked out about COVID.
That's true.
And I was just thinking, finally society has given me justification to wear a mask when I go into a public space and douse my hands in hand sanitizer, and nobody will flinch. Nobody will look at me twice. So I don't know. I actually posed this to friends and family, and I've gotten one person that was emphatically saying, oh no, they're on edge. I had one person saying, I think that it's more that latter option. And I had one person saying, I think it's somewhere in the middle. So I'm very curious to see what our listeners think. Chime in with your 2 cents on that little opening chit chat question of ours. Gentlemen, it is Earth Day, which is Jim's favorite holiday.
Lenin's birthday. It's Lenin's birthday.
Lenin's
also
birthday.
Earth Day. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Was that a coincidence or?
No, it's not a coincidence.
Are you serious?
No, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I think Earth Day was chosen April 22nd because it was Lenin's birthday. It was founded by socialists and Marxists, and to this day, it was 1970, the year I was born. Earth Day was founded, and it's not a coincidence that it's Lenin's birthday.
So was it always?
I did not know that.
It was always an anti-capitalist thing. I figured it started off with just hey, everyone, cut your little plastic pop containers so that ducks don't get stuck in them. I thought that was the origins of it, honestly.
Yeah, me too.
Well, no, I mean it's been Earth Day has been. See, this is the genius of left and the way they market things. It's we used to call ourselves conservationists. If you cared about the environment, you were a conservationist. You cared about cleaning up our streams. The old commercial from the 70s of the guy playing an Indian with the tear coming down his face as he looks at all the garbage around the long river. That's how the environmental movement was sold to us all back in the 1970s. And then when Earth Day was founded, it was the idea that come on, let's take care of the earth. The thing is, we have taken fantastic care of the earth. Sure. The dirty rivers, the garbage everywhere like that. Sure, of course, there's pollution, there's garbage in rivers, but it's nothing like it was back in the 1970s. We needed Earth Day. We needed a reminder that we need to take better care of our environment. We need to conserve it for future generations. But now, Earth Day has become basically. Other than May Day is probably the greatest Marxist holiday going right now. And it's the idea that we have to stop living life, again, back to normal. We have to stop living life normally. We have to stop using fossil fuels. We have to stop driving our own cars to save the earth. Here's good news, everybody. Earth Day was a fantastic success. We did it. We did it, everyone. We saved the Earth. It's not going. It's not
water
going
and air has never been cleaner.
Water and air has never been cleaner. And that's the thing about the left, is that they don't ever stop. They don't ever stop. They don't ever say, you know what, we just accomplished it. Let's throw a party and we'll just commemorate our success every year. No, it's always moving forward. There's always something else that needs to be done. And what needs to be done is that you have to be less free. Our economies have to be smaller. We have to live more miserable lives to quote unquote save the Earth. So Earth Day is actually, it shouldn't be considered a celebration anymore. It should be a reminder of what the environmental left wants to do to control your life, because you're not living your life the way they want to, because you're free.
Well, remember I'm going to remember you saying that the liberals never stop, because I'm going to bring that up a little bit later in this conversation. But with Earth Day, when I'm looking for topics and articles to talk about, I made the bad mistake of just going on Twitter and looking up hashtag Earth Day. And I was just inundated with all the most asinine stuff regarding Earth Day that you could imagine. And compare that to, for example, I'll start off with some examples. There was a big post about painting on trees. Is that going to save the Earth? Is that going to save the tree? If anything, it's going to hurt the tree, honestly. T-Mobile was giving away a Tesla. Is that going to save the world? No, it's not. It's a bad marketing virtue signaling scheme, if anything. So it's just the most asinine stuff.
Well, and then it's the same stuff that you see with the Black Lives Matter protests and the woke corporate culture. It's
sure.
You have Black History Month, and every corporation under the sun comes out with their commercials supporting whatever trendy march it is or what have you, but it never does anything to actually move the needle forward on legitimate comprehensive police reform, criminal justice reform, which I support, but it always just becomes these hashtaggy trending stuff that never really gets anything done.
That's a very good point. And we've covered policy studies and stuff about police reform, justice reform, and all of that. And it's just what's going to get more traction? What's going to actually cause more change in the world? Some academic look at the problems that we have in society, or somebody painting on a tree? So and I bring that up because on the also what popped up when I looked up Twitter was a UN post. The United Nations made a post, and it was basically a press release, and it was titled "Earth Day 2021 is set to galvanize climate action." And the opening paragraph says, "Earth Day, celebrated annually on the 22nd of April, will again see more than 1 billion people participating in activities around the world to draw attention to the urgency of the climate crisis, environmental degradation, and the need for immediate action." So just right there, 1 billion people. Jim, does that seem a little bit inflated to you? I mean, who are we counting with this 1 billion people?
If I was so much in control of the narrative and of our academies and of the media and of Hollywood and of our governments and of the United Nations, and I could only get 1 billion people to participate in my religious activity on Earth Day, I would feel pretty disappointed. There's a lot more than 1 billion people in the world.
Sure.
That's a fail, guys. You guys got to do a lot better than that.
I thought it was just a ridiculous inflation. Who are we counting? Are we counting the people that are living in caves without electricity? They're living Earth Day to its fullest, not voluntarily, of course, but
The only thing I can think of is they just counted the countries that are participating.
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, because look at this. It says the U.S. As the U.S. re-enters the global climate fight, U.S. President Biden is convening a virtual leaders summit on climate from April 22nd to April 23rd with the participation of 40 world leaders. So, I mean, that's 40 people. So where's the other 999,960?
Yeah. Well, I watched a little bit of the when I got into work today, I watched a little bit of the live stream on YouTube of the Global Climate Summit, or whatever the hell it is. John Kerry was presiding over it. It's all remote, of course. It's just a fancy Zoom call. That's all it is. And you have these leaders, they all get up to speak. There were 4,000 people watching on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
4,000.
Nice.
I've watched live streams of people talking about Batman that have more people on it than that.
Right.
And this is, and again, as much as I the Heartland Institute, we fight for climate realism. You can look over my shoulder here. This is the Climate Change Reconsidered series. This is packed. That's about 5,000 pages of peer-reviewed literature that talks about how humans are not causing a climate crisis, basically, canceling the reason for all the stuff that's happening today on Earth Day. But again, if you have all of this power and all of this influence and everybody on your side, and you get 4,000 people to watch your global climate summit with John Kerry, and Biden kicked it off, and you have world leaders. Boris Johnson spoke at it earlier, and you can only get 4,000 people watching on YouTube. Yeah. That's pretty sad. And so I'm actually pretty encouraged that people are tuning out. Although if you have insomnia, or if you need to take a nap this afternoon, go ahead and put that on. You'll be out. You'll be out in within 10 minutes.
Yeah, more than 4,000 people listen to our average episode.
Way more than 4,000 people.
Yeah, right. We're outdoing the UN's global initiative for climate, whatever.
Yeah.
It says that the theme for this year, the second Earth Day live digital event, is Restore Our Earth. So because of COVID, they have to go largely digital, apparently. So I wonder what the carbon footprint of that is. All those servers running, right? Although if it's only 4,000 people joining it, I guess it's not that much.
That's true.
It says the Exponential Climate Action Summit is a collaboration between the We Don't Have Time, the world's largest and longest running social network for the climate. I added that last part in. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It just seems so, just the whole thing, just this press release from the UN, the other things that I saw on Twitter, it just seems so asinine. What are they accomplishing? They're accomplishing nothing. Like I said last episode, I feel like, until CNN turns on the superchargers for this story to get everyone scared, it just really seems like this is running out of steam. They're just grasping at straws here. They're counting all of Africa, as people participating in Earth Day or something like that. It's just crazy.
As much as I despise a lot of the people who try to push this narrative, I sincerely don't believe any of these people are really stupid. I think they realize that, the West, and especially the United States, are not one of the major contributors to, world pollution. The number 1 and number 2 spot is China and India, respectively. So they know this, and they know that a lot of Americans know this, but not the majority. And so really the only reason for them to be pushing this much is because they can make a profit off of it. Either whether or not that's going to be purely economic profit, or if that's going to be a increase in power, which is I think is their main reason for pushing it. We see that with the World Economic Forum and pushing their Great Reset, and all of this different stuff that coalesces and just to more power for the federal government and for the international community at large.
No, that is a very good point, and I'm glad I'm not the person that brought up the Great Reset. I feel like I'm the person that constantly brings that up. So thank you for jumping on that one for me.
Of course.
But yeah, you are absolutely right. When it comes to global CO2 emissions, the United States is a distant behind the leader, which is China. And the last time I checked was several years ago. I think the data was several years old, but China just alone was responsible for 30% of global CO2 emissions. That's Jim, right. I think you have a segment ready to be pulled up, a little soundbite of John Kerry. And this perfectly exemplifies a lot of things that we say on this podcast all the time. So let's hear this. Of course, it doesn't have any sound, Jim. Basically, John Kerry says...
I'm sorry, I'll do it again.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, just vamp for me here. Just
well, this is one of those things that you have to bring up whenever you're having a conversation about global warming. I think I might have covered this in the last episode where we covered a number of things that you should have on hand, intellectual ammunition on hand when you're having this conversation about global warming. But I think that your average person, alarmist about climate change, would be surprised to find out that the United States is a distant second behind China when it comes to global CO2 emissions.
I'll say, aren't we 14th or 15th? We're way down the list.
We're 15% of global CO2 emissions. China is double that alone, right? Okay. So that's China's 30%. The United States is 15. Now, these are older numbers, so if trends continue, I would think that the United States is still going down, led largely because of fracking and all of that, and China is largely going up because for every coal mine and coal power plant that we shut down, they open up a couple, and they've got no intentions on slowing down. Now, there's occasionally a story that comes out every once in a while that suggests that Xi Jinping, or whatever the leader of China is, that he's committed to reducing CO2 emissions, and he's got some plan to reduce it in the short term. But in reality, it's these regional governors of China that have all the power when it comes to energy manufacturing, and they have zero intention on following the, whatever empty promises that the leader of China is making. So they could say all the things that they want and put all these timelines they want about, limiting CO2 emissions, but it's not going to happen. Not anytime soon, at least. No.
And so, the clip I tried to play and the audio didn't go. John Kerry gave an interview to the Washington Post.
I vamped pretty good for you too. I bought you some time.
Didn't help. I have another video to play anyway. But so John Kerry was interviewed by the Washington Post, and he said that if the United States went to zero emissions tomorrow, in other words, if we just we're nuked from space or something, and nothing else operated, that we had zero CO2 emissions, that it wouldn't help, it wouldn't save the planet. It wouldn't have it make any real difference. And he said, if you put China and the United States together and turned off all of their CO2 emissions automatically tomorrow, boom, done, it still wouldn't be enough to save the planet. And so this is where I talked earlier, it's never enough. I mean, we could literally shut down our entire life, our entire society. And John Kerry says it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. And if you combine China and the United States combined are 45% of all CO2 emissions in the world.
Right.
So you could cut CO2 emissions globally in half and it won't make any difference. So where are they going? What do they want to do with this? I mean, this is beyond scaremongering. This is, and this is almost beyond religion. I mean, in most religions, you have to do some sacrifice, right? And then that's part of it. And so, and here, John Kerry basically is saying for the climate religion, it's not even just some sacrifice. You can even sacrifice your entire society, and it still won't be enough to please the climate gods. So, there has to be some redemption here. There has to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But always with these people, especially with John Kerry, there's never any light. There's only darkness, and there's only you do what you're told.
Reminds me of the medieval style Christian priests that back in the day they used to flog themselves out of penance to Christ. And so, but it was never enough. They had to do it like at least once a week because, no matter how many times they ripped their flesh off, it wasn't enough to even compare to, Christ's sacrifice. So it seems like no matter how much, they supposedly want us to sacrifice, it will never be enough.
Okay, so just like I said to remember that you said liberals never stop, remember about that sentence about sacrifice too, because that's also going to be brought up in the same thing coming up here. Okay, so I found this other article, and I didn't send this to you guys, so just bear with me here. But it was from Grist, which is a very left-leaning publication. And this is actually an older article, but I found a few that kind of reflect the same sentiment, so I was going to use it anyways. And the title of it is Earth Day Gets No Respect. No respect at all, I tell you. I heard a group of my friends were going to be celebrating Earth Day, and it turns out they were celebrating at midnight the fact that Earth Day was over. No respect, I tell you. That was my terrible Rodney Dangerfield impression. Anyways, the author of the article explains how Earth Day was largely co-opted by people like us, that use the occasion to explain why the world is not doomed and that global warming hysteria is overblown. Sorry to rain on your parade, Grist, but that's exactly what we're doing here. So I don't know. You get this. I when I was looking for articles, I got the sentiment that even people, on the left side of the aisle, the environmentalists, the global warming alarmists, they still feel like Earth Day, their big celebration for all of this, is still kind of like not moving the needle at all.
You don't.
And
say.
Is that a testament to just like how successful people like we are? Or
what's the fun way to celebrate Earth Day? I mean, you can't have a barbecue. That would be bad because you'd be grilling meat, which is bad. You would be burning charcoal, which is CO2 emissions, and that's actually worse. You can't burn wood, my God, that's even worse than charcoal. Maybe,
No propane.
No propane. That's right. You can't use
No.
fossil fuels. So,
No.
how exactly do you have fun on Earth Day? Have a picnic? I mean,
Well-
that's what's great about American holidays, is that it's always an excuse to gather with friends and eat something, and usually drink
what
something
is it
too.
where everyone was supposed to turn their like power off for an hour? Is that Earth Day, or is that
Oh,
something else? Is that
That's
Earth
something
Hour?
else.
That's Earth
that's
Hour.
different.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I figured that was just trying to train people to just like cope with power outages,
Right.
because that's what we'll have if we pursue their policies.
Yeah, there's groups that Heartland works with that call that they turn that Earth Hour around and call it Prosperity Hour, and they encourage everyone to turn on all the lights in their house to celebrate the fact that we can do that. That electricity is there on demand, and by the way, it doesn't just come out of the wall. It's actually generated by something, and that's usually coal or natural gas in this country. And if you want it to come on all the time, you're going to need that. And so I actually, Earth Day, you should celebrate by again, we should celebrate the successful protection of the environment that we have accomplished, especially in the United States, but all over the Western world on Earth Day, by going for a walk in a park, and then actually appreciating the fact that we have cleaned up the earth. It's great news, but reject all this environmental, religious nonsense.
Right.
Sure.
Just
Well-
go enjoy yourself at like a national park, or go on a hiking trail or something like that. Enjoy and
and bring a
rest easy.
plastic bag and pick up some garbage along
Yeah,
the way.
right.
Like let's
Exactly.
be serious about this.
Be conservationist about it.
Yeah, the person that is the most anti-global warming still doesn't want trash in the parks. You know what I mean? Like
I am never more infuriated when I see someone toss something out of their window on the highway. I mean, I'm always tempted to call the police, even though I don't think it would help. But it's just so inconsiderate. I mean, littering is one of my pet peeves.
yeah,
As you sip out of a plastic cup, that's great. That's
Hey,
a throw away.
I will responsibly make sure this ends up in the landfill. Okay, all right, I'm doing my part, Jim.
Well, you could also celebrate Earth Day by being more like Genghis Khan. As suggested by this other article, and everything that we talk about, it could be found in the show notes. But it is a Guardian article, and this article is a little bit old too, but it's just too funny not to comment on. Why Genghis Khan was good for the planet. So it starts off saying his empire lasted a century and a half and eventually covered nearly a quarter of the Earth's surface. His murderous Mongol armies were responsible for the massacre of as many as 40 million people. Even today, his name remains a byword for brutality and terror. But boy, was Genghis green. Genghis Khan, in fact, may have been not just the greatest warrior, but the greatest eco-warrior of all time, according to a study by the Carnegie Institute's Department of Global Energy. It has concluded that the 13th century Mongol leader's bloody advance, laying waste of vast swaths of territory and wiping out entire civilizations en route, may have scrubbed 70 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere, roughly the quantity of carbon dioxide generated in a year through global petrol consumption, by allowing previously populated and cultivated land to return to carbon-absorbing forests. So I looked at the study itself, and it talks about how it wanted to track basically the great death of Europe, the Mongol invasion of Asia, the conquest of the Americas, and the fall of the Ming Dynasty, to see if it had some impact when it came to global CO2 emissions. It says, we found that during the short events such as the Black Death and the Ming Dynasty collapse, the forest regrowth wasn't enough to overcome the emissions from decaying material in the soil. But during the longer lasting ones, like the Mongol invasion and the conquest of the Americas, there was enough time for the forest to regrow and absorb significant amounts of carbon. So Jim, when you hear about this, after you belly laugh, what is your response to it?
Wow. Well, I mean, just the idea, by the way, of environmentalist extremists praising, or at least not attacking, Genghis Khan, who was one of the great mass murderers of all of human history. Absolutely brutal. The Mongol invasion and control of Asia was so complete, and that I think I saw this. Maybe it was a documentary or something a few years back, that 1/4 of all the people in Asia have some can trace some lineage back to Genghis Khan. That's
Right.
that's
I think it's
the
10.
level of human destruction. Is it what?
Sorry, I
10%?
think it's 10%. I think it's,
10%.
or maybe it's 10% of all people on Earth. Maybe that's where I'm getting that.
It could be that, yeah. But that gives you an idea of what he did. He slaughtered all the men and basically repopulated Asia with his own DNA to a certain extent. And so for environmentalists, I wouldn't call it mainstream, but for a corporate big newspaper like The Guardian to even entertain the idea that Genghis Khan is to be admired because he was green, that he did his destructive, his murderous ways were actually a benefit for the environment. I guess because fewer people mean the Earth is in better shape. But what aside from that, when you talk about the Black Death, in the Dark Ages, it was actually a very cold time for Europe. It was kind of a double whammy. The Earth was cooler then than it is now, and then you add in the the bubonic plague, and it devastated Europe. I think 1/4 of all the population just died off, and it took, I think, at least a couple hundred years for the population to recover. It might have been as many as 500 years for the population of Europe to recover to what it was before, the Black Death took hold there.
I mean, estimations range from like anywhere from half to 2/3 of Europe's population was wiped out.
Right. And so that was a pretty good event. But again, environmentalists would actually consider that a good thing because, more people is bad for the environment. The truth of the matter is, though, that warmer climates are better for human prosperity. In fact, it was not just the Black Death kind of fading away, but it was also the warming of the earth. That helped the so-called medieval warm period, helped the humanity in Europe to bounce back. The medieval warm period is why Greenland is called Greenland and not white land instead or Iceland, where there already was an Iceland. But because the earth is warmer, humans prosper more. They live longer lives. That you can grow more crops. You can sustain an actual civilization. It's very hard to maintain a civilization when it's cold and dark, and that's the way it was in the Dark Ages, and that's why a warmer climate, as we're warming up right now, we're still coming out of a pretty cold period, is actually great for human flourishing.
Well, and to your point, Jim, I don't think, for people who don't understand that the Earth's weather patterns go in cycles, is that, like you said, during the Middle Ages, we actually went into a mini ice age. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, like you said, they called Greenland green, because when they first discovered it, it was actually green and not, just an ice cap. They had vineyards in Great Britain, mm-hmm. before the mini ice age. So, I mean, it really goes to show you how much flux there is in, even just the past thousand years of history as far as weather goes.
Yeah. So I'm willing to give the researchers of the study and the author of the Guardian article the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that the study was actually advocating anything. I don't think that it was. I think it was just kind of taking an academic look at what were the ramifications of these objectively horrible things that happened. And I think the article, even from the Guardian, was a bit tongue in cheek. But we've covered enough stuff on this podcast to know that we're not that far away from people on the left truly advocating for population control.
Oh, we know we're not. It was just a couple of years ago that there was that crazy lady who stood up at an AOC speaking event and, advocated for eating babies to cut back on population.
That one might have been a joke too. So
was that a joke?
I think that was a gag.
I'd be willing to write that one off. But I got a couple here. So one that I always reference is a study by academics at Georgetown University and Johns Hopkins University that was a study called Population Engineering and the Fight Against Climate Change. And in it outlines a number of policies that could be taken on to help curb population growth. And it puts them across the spectrum of coercion, they call it. So on the far left side of the spectrum of coercion, the least coercive elements of this would be choice enhancement and access to healthcare, which is essentially just like abortion rights. The next, if you slide down the spectrum of coercion a little bit, it's preference adjustment. And as you read through it, it talks about putting up billboards and putting in having smaller family messaging in like TV shows and movies. So that's just propaganda, essentially. Slide down a little bit further, and it's incentivization, which is adjusting the tax code to discourage people from having large families. And then the furthest to the right, and they say that they don't advocate this one at all, but they've said that they would be open to the other ones, is flat out coercion, which is like China's one-child policy and other things that have happened in other countries. So that is a study that I reference all the time to show that there is academics that are kind of coalescing around this idea of population control. Michael Moore's Planet of the Humans that we did a couple of episodes on, that by the end of it, it kind of teeters on the edge of endorsing population control. It doesn't straight up do it, but it basically, it kind of tiptoes around that bush there. A climate crisis letter signed by 11,000 scientists back in 2019 called human population growth, quote, a profoundly troubling sign. And the CNN climate town hall thing, that like 7-hour disaster that, again, we covered on this podcast. Bernie Sanders responded to a question of whether we should actively educate people on the need to curb population growth by saying yes. So there is enough out there to not go to the crazy AOC lady, in the crowd to say that, no, there is some actual smoke here. And where there's smoke, there oftentimes is fire. So, Jim, do you think that this is just me being a little alarmist and kind of looking at flinching at shadows here? Or do you think that how long before this actually becomes like a policy platform for some segment of the left?
It's already here. I mean, it's maybe not talked about a lot, and we're much more sensitive to this stuff here at the Heartland Institute, and us as as researchers and writers and people that produce this podcast, because we're always consuming the news all the time. But it's not actually that hard to find on social media and in corporate media calls, or I should say complaints that there are too many people on the planet. It is considered a virtue, and I've seen this. People saying that it's irresponsible. Like, for instance, the quarterback for he just retired, longtime quarterback for the San Diego Chargers, Phillip Rivers. I think he has 9 children, and he was pilloried all the time. It's like, that's irresponsible. How could you have 9 children? That is irresponsible. You're overpopulating the planet. People who have large families are, it's culturally acceptable to attack them for having too many kids. You see it all the time. And so this has already been mainstreamed, and it's not just, a kind of an elitist looking down the nose at people who have large families, because people who have large families tend to be conservative. They tend to be Christian. They tend to be rural. It's just the way it goes. And people that are, cosmopolitan in the cities look down their nose in general at such people that live out there in the hinterlands. Well, but it's also, there's also, and it comes up a lot, the environmental aspect to it, that it is irresponsible to basically produce, more than a replacement level future polluters.
Yeah. Well, in our field, and we have to kind of keep track of what like politicians say and stuff. You have the Hillary Clintons of the world that say, there's certain things that I'll say in public, and there's certain things that I'll say behind closed doors, right? They have a filter to make sure that they keep as many people, as many potential voters as possible happy with what they have to say. Bernie Sanders doesn't quite have that filter as much, so that's why he does say yes to things like educating people on population control. I'm just wondering when will we have like a mainstream Democratic candidate that's like, oh yeah, we have to start adjusting the tax code to discourage large families? Like, how long before that happens? I wonder if it's after they kind of get their way, however long it takes, after they get their way on getting, major wind and solar energy as a part of our energy infrastructure, and like that clearly won't work, right? So after that doesn't work, they have to come to something else. And I wonder if this is that something else. Something
I've noticed is that, especially during the pandemic, they've been very quiet on environment, like environmentalism in general. And I think one is just because like the COVID ratings were through the roof. So it just made economic sense for them to hyper focus on COVID. But not only that, it seems like there's a cognitive dissonance between the same side that says our population is too big, we should institute population control to save the planet, are the same people who are saying, even if it saves one life, we should shut down our entire economy.
Sure.
Even if it saves one, like, doesn't that seem just a little bit contradictory to you?
It does a little bit.
Even slightly.
Jim, I do want to start bringing up our COVID topic because we have a couple of articles I want to get your guys' opinion on here. But I know we at the Heartland Institute, we have our International Conference on Climate Change coming up here pretty soon, and we've got some digital things going on as well. Can you inform our listeners?
Sure. Yes. The 14th International Conference on Climate Change is October 15th through the 17th at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. It is going to bring together the leading scientists and policy experts from around the world who in general do not think humans are causing a climate crisis. And you will learn a lot about what is actually happening to the Earth by coming to this conference or watching the live stream. If you can't make it there in person, and you can get more information at climateconference.heartland.org, or you can just go straight to heartland.org, and there's a link there for you to go, and you can check out the program. And we'd love to see you there, either in person or online.
Now we're doing some lead up stuff to it too, right? We're doing some preview type stuff, right?
Yeah, that's actually true. In fact, in about an hour, I'll be hosting, or Heartland will be hosting, one of our speakers at that climate conference, Kevin Diaratna from the Heritage Foundation. He's going to be talking about the so-called social cost of carbon, and actually the benefits of a warming world, as a preview of what he'll be talking about at our climate conference. And in fact, if you just keep tuned into this YouTube channel, if you hit subscribe and hit the alert button, you'll get notices when we're doing this. We're going to continue to roll out more like preview presentations, so you can actually get a real good sense that this is a serious conference. And if you have a curious mind and really want to know what's happening to the Earth, you need to come. You need to be a part of it. You need to watch.
All right, fantastic. Fantastic. All right, let's move on to fear and COVID-19. So there's a couple of stories that have happened. Obviously, we cover COVID a lot because there's not a whole lot else in the news to cover. So COVID-19, one of the most recent developments, as everybody knows, there's vaccines that are rolling out, and you can get the one version where you get one shot, you have to come in 3 weeks later and get the second shot. And then there's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I think there's a third one too, but I don't know. I lose track of these things. But recently, once it seems like, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, everyone's getting vaccinated, life can return to normal, all of this stuff, there was a decision that was made by the FDA to put a pause on the release of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So I've got an article here from the Reason Foundation. It's titled, "The FDA's Decision to Pause J&J Vaccination Will Kill People." So the first paragraph starts off saying the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Food and Drug Administration issued a statement today recommending a pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine. The agencies took this step out of an abundance of caution based on 6 cases of a rare blood clot disorder in people who have been inoculated with the one-dose vaccine. There has been 6 cases out of 6.8 million people that have already been inoculated with the vaccine. The blood clot incidents all occur in women between the ages of 18 and 48. So those odds amount to about 1 in 1.13 million, which is comparable to your annual chances of being struck by lightning, which is 1 in 1.22 million. So, this kind of goes to Nate's point there, where it's like, if it potentially saves one life, we have to end vaccination? I don't know. Like, where are we? Like, I feel like every day, whether it's the Fauci saying not to wear a mask and then saying to wear a mask, and now it's like, even if there are side effects with the vaccine, you should get it because it's better than getting COVID. And now it's like, if you get a blood clot, then nobody gets the vaccine. Like, I just get so confused, man. Like, I get so confused.
I hate this timeline. I want to go to a different timeline where this crap isn't happening.
Well, Nate, I think on the previous episode, you've kind of mentioned how, like, you're not really, trying to knock down the doors to be first in line to get a vaccine, to say the least.
Sure. I mean,
what's your response when you hear this story about them, like, removing, putting the pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine based on, a couple of, a couple of things here?
It seems ridiculously overcautious. I mean, certainly we want to make sure that the vaccine is going to be safe for everybody, but, 6 people out of, whatever the number was, 1.3 million people. Like, that's
6.8 million.
I'm sorry, 6.8 million. Jeez. Like that's a overwhelmingly tiny minority. I mean, I would leave it up to, the medical professionals to decide what's best. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's a chance that I think it would be worth taking, if you decide to get the vaccine. I would, if I chose to get the vaccine, that wouldn't perturb me from getting it.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, you are going to get one soon or something. Is this going to stifle your motivation to go and get a vaccine?
No, since I'm not a female between the ages of 18 and 45, I actually want to jump to the front of the line for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
There you go.
Because I think my chances of having an adverse effect to that is probably even less than 1 in 1.13 million. Look, I actually want to get this over with. I want to get the vaccine only because, again, at the climate conference that we're doing in Las Vegas, there's going to be I'm going to be interacting with a lot of people. I don't think I'm going to get COVID. And if I get COVID, I don't think I'm going to die. A lot of people, you go to a conference, you get sick anyway, right? Like CPAC. We used to go to CPAC. They called the CPAC plague. Every year, somebody would get, would spread the flu around or something, and everybody would, by the time they got home, they would feel like crap. That was pretty common. But I want to get the vaccine because when I'm interacting with a lot of people at a conference like our climate conference, I want the people I'm interacting with to be comfortable around me. I want them to know it's like, don't worry about it. I got the vaccine. I'm not a carrier. You're not going to get it. It's just a matter of making the people around me feel better. So I want to get it over with, but I'm actually on the waiting list in my county here in Illinois. I keep checking every other day to see when I'm going to be able to get any vaccine, because you have to do it in 2 stages and they have to be a couple of weeks apart. So it's basically a month-long process to finally be, vaccinated fully against COVID-19, but I can't get out. I keep getting nothing. I'm on a wait list. I can't find the vaccine anywhere. And when I try to find it, like in drugstores or around me, they say, no, we don't have them. We can't do it for you. So, I want to get it out of the way, but there's just one other thing to remember about the COVID-19 vaccine, and it's proving to be effective. And if you get it, you should be able to go right back to your normal life, because, your chances of getting COVID at that point are even less than getting struck by lightning. I think it was 0.008% chance that you're going to get COVID and have an adverse reaction once you have the vaccine. So that's fantastic. But one thing to remember, and this is not to make people panic about it, but remember how this COVID-19 the Operation Warp Speed was set up. The pharmaceutical companies are not. We are unable to hold them liable, basically sue them if you have adverse reactions to the COVID-19 vaccine. They are immune from any lawsuits that happen for this vaccine. And so, this has never happened before. We've never had a vaccine that's happened this quickly before. Thank goodness it seems to be very effective. But the bottom line is they are still the pharmaceutical companies are still immune from any civil punishment if something goes haywire with this. And it's actually an untested vaccine. I mean, now it's actually, you couldn't say that anymore. It's being tested globally right now. It just didn't go through the testing before it started going into massive numbers of shoulders. But I can't wait to get it, just because I just want to get it over with. And I'm not getting a vaccine passport. To hell with that. You're just gonna have to take my word for it that I am immune.
Well, I don't know. It's just. Okay, so the main point of this article is saying that this is going to slow down the rollout of this vaccine, which is going to cause more people to succumb to COVID-19, right? But there's another part in this article that talks about how if this is going to hurt or help people's confidence in vaccines. And it says that the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee member, Dr. Paul Offit, tells Forbes that the pause should be largely reassuring because it shows that agencies are still looking into to determine possible side effects even after the vaccine was approved. And then the article, the author of the article, kind of puts in a counterpoint to that, saying that the optimism seems dubious given that public confidence in the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine plunged, according to a YouGov poll, after various European governments paused its distribution in March over reports of similarly rare anomalous post-vaccine blood clotting incidents. So it's just they think that this is going to help people's confidence in it. Pulling the vaccine over 6 cases of people getting blood clots is going to help people's confidence in this. It just seems like they're actively. a government that's trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible and is not necessarily carrying out, but is endorsing the idea of vaccine passports, which we've talked about in previous episodes. They seem like they're fighting against themselves. They're putting up as many roadblocks as possible to like discourage people from getting this vaccine. It's insane. It's insane. Again, what timeline are we in? Like this is, I just don't get it.
The cynic / conspiracy theorist in me would say that they want to draw this out for as long as possible, so that they can allow themselves enough time so the media can cook up a new variant to freak out about, which will freak the population back out. And so then everything locks back down. So then they can pump out a new vaccine to peddle to people so that they can just keep profiting. But that's just my wild conspiracy.
Yeah, they really don't want the crisis to end, right? It's giving them too much power and too much opportunity. And
never let a good tragedy go to waste, and milk that thing until it runs dry.
Yeah. And I applaud you, Donnie, for getting us back on the question you actually asked, or the topic you're trying to get to before I went on my little COVID rant. But this is actually more proof of the incompetence of government. From Dr. Fauci on down, you can't. It was six adverse reactions to one vaccine, and you shut it down. You don't just say, you know what? Since all of the people that had a problem with this were of a specific demographic, young women. I believe I read somewhere that all of them were on birth control, so that may have had something to do with it. Mm-hmm. So then you shut down the entire vaccine, yet you're trying to tell people, go ahead and get the vaccine. It's all safe. It's like, well, which one is it? Is it safe or not safe? Because you basically took it off the market because of 6 reactions. Now, so why wouldn't that discourage people from getting the vaccine?
No doubt.
I mean, you don't have to be conspiracy theorists to wonder. Just think logically. If only 6 people had an adverse reaction and they still pulled it, what aren't they telling us about it? It has to be more dangerous than that for them to pull it, right? That's the logical explanation or the logical thought process.
And like the enemy of the state, according to some of these people, are like these anti-vaxxers, right? That are like, we're never going to get a vaccine. It's like, this is just all the ammunition they'll ever need, Right. Like this headline that the J&J shot has been taken down. Like, you don't have to read into the first paragraph. You just hold that headline up and scare a lot of people away from wanting to get it. So it's encouraging the anti-vaxxer people, right?
And if it was really only 6 women who were all on birth control, like, couldn't you just put out like a stipulation that says, like, if you are a young female between the ages of 18 to 45 and you are currently on birth control, we do not recommend taking this vaccine.
Right.
And that would discount that portion of the population, and then everybody else could still take it. Right. So I think Jim's point is pretty valid in saying, like, what aren't they telling us? Because what they're doing now seems highly illogical.
Well, here's another idea. How about giving people the choice whether or not they want to take it or not?
Yes, exactly.
Let them make their own decision for their healthcare and say, like, I would like to take the Johnson & Johnson shot now, actually, because it's probably more available. I mean, just put it back out there so I can get the damn shots and get it over with.
Right.
But gosh, the idea of giving people the ability to make their own choices about their own bodies and their own healthcare. Oh, shatter,
Yeah, if anything, that this just gives like perfect justification to not make anything like this mandatory. Even if there is a lightning strikes chance of having a adverse reaction to this, like, that's enough for me to say, well, it's another reason to say, like, no, we shouldn't have any mandatory vaccination, in this country, right? And so let it out there, know that there are some possible side effects, and let people make the choice. Like, it's that simple. I got one more story I want to get to here, Jim. And this one goes right into your alley, so you don't want to waste time on whatever you're about to say. But this is a New York Times article. COVID coverage by the U.S. national media is an outlier, a study finds. So the article starts off, and it's talking about an economics professor from Dartmouth College that noticed that all of the media coverage surrounding COVID was negative. Everything seemed negative. When the cases were rising, obviously there was negative stories about it. When cases were decreasing, the media focused on places where the cases were rising, right? When vaccine research was showing positive results, the media coverage seemed to downplay it. So he was, what's with this? So he wanted to check in and test his own, anecdotal evidence with this. And he put together a little study that was going to look into the news coverage of COVID from every major network, CNN, Fox News, Politico, New York Times, hundreds of other sources in the United States and overseas. And he was going to analyze it to see whether or not what he was perceiving was reality. And what he found out was that his perception was absolutely true. It showed that the media coverage was obscenely negative when it came to anything COVID related. And that wouldn't necessarily be anything that would like raise any antennas just because it's COVID. How do you have a really shiny story about, sunny story about COVID? But the kind of the big takeaway from this is that the coverage by US publications with a national audience had a much more negative coverage than any other source internationally. So it says here that about 87% of COVID coverage in national US media last year was negative. The share was 51% in international media, 53% in US regional media, and 64% in scientific journals. So, Jim, I mean, I'm going to throw this to you because you were in the media for a chunk of your life here. What is the explanation for that? Why is the U.S. national coverage so much more negative than all of their peers?
Did I hear you right? You said only 89% of the COVID coverage was negative.
Yeah, about 87.
It wasn't 98%.
Yeah,
just
right.
87. So yeah, I guess we consider ourselves lucky. Look, I'll tell you why the coverage was negative, because COVID was used to get the bad orange man out of the White House. If it was to cause a crisis, if the actual story of COVID in this country, in the United States, is actually a fantastic success, and a lot of it, frankly, has to do with the policies that Donald Trump put in place when he was president, Operation Warp Speed in particular. But it was negative because they wanted to get Donald Trump out of the White House and get Joe Biden elected. You might notice I bet a detailed look into his analysis would show that the coverage for COVID here in the United States got slightly more positive after about November 6th, 2020, but especially since the inauguration in January, and which is all, I guess, all to the good. But it's a real indictment on our corrupt leftist press, corporate press in this country, that 89% of the coverage of COVID is negative, while in other Western democracies in Europe, it's about half and half, and that's because they're sane people over there, and our media here is corrupt and incompetent.
Well, and Jim, I think a perfect example of that is the coverage of Operation Warp Speed. Because while Trump was in office, you had people like Kamala Harris saying, like, I don't know if I'll trust that vaccine. It's been rushed, it's been hurried, and the left was crying over the fact that basically the left was almost adopting an anti-vaxxer position. It was like, we don't trust him, so we don't trust this vaccine. And as soon as Joe Biden was predicted to be the winner, that narrative flipped on its head. And it's like, like, if you don't want to take the vaccine, you're an anti-vaxxer bigot, and how dare you want grandma to die. And it all hinged just on Joe Biden being elected. And to your point about Europe, I very rarely will you ever hear me say this, but I actually admire the Europeans on their attitudes towards COVID, because and this has been completely left out of American media on both the left and the right. They're having massive COVID protests over there in all sorts of countries, everywhere from Spain to Russia to the UK to France, Germany. People are rising up and are tired of these lockdowns. They're fighting with the police. They're sitting in courthouses and government buildings. Like, they don't want these lockdowns any more than a lot of Americans don't.
Remember the lockdown protests in Michigan? And it was treated by our media as if, like, the Michigan militia showed up,
right.
and they basically treat anybody who protests against COVID lockdowns as some kind of nut or a denier or terrorist. Some sort of but basically they treat people who don't like lockdowns as domestic terrorists. And I saw a story the other day, and this is I think in the fullness of time people will come to realize this. In fact, I think I give the American people a lot of credit. I think a lot of people have absorbed the truth of the matter, that COVID is not as deadly and is not as big a problem as was sold to us by our media and our government. But I saw a study, an observation the other day, that So now we're more than a year since the breakout of the pandemic here in the United States. And some states had locked down and still have very strict lockdown policies, like here in Illinois and in Michigan. And other states, of course, like Florida and Texas, didn't lock down either at all or very little and opened up right away.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually had no effect overall over time on who got infected with COVID and who didn't, and who died from COVID and who didn't. Michigan right now is going through a spike. They are one of the hot spots in the United States. They are super locked down over there. Florida, of course, it's with a very elderly population. The COVID cases are bottoming out, and so. We said this from the very beginning, the idea that you can hide from a virus, especially one that's as highly contagious as COVID, like by basically digging a hole in the ground and jumping in and waiting for it to pass over you like a fog, that's child thinking. But
Right.
that's the thing. Yeah. That's basically the policy of the United States.
And not to mention that the virus thrives in artificial conditions. They've proven that UV light has a real negative effect on the spread and transmission of COVID-19. Yet every time there's a slight spike in cases, we lock ourselves down and confine ourselves to strictly artificial environments. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I was gonna reference that comment there, Jim. I think that our video is gonna be taken down if I say the word, but back in the Trump era of this pandemic, there was a potential not a remedy, but I don't know what the word for it is, but it started with an H.
What does it rhyme with?
It rhymes with hydroxychloroquine.
Oh, darn it. Our video's down.
God dang it.
Gosh dang it. But yeah, it was like it's like, oh, this might be something that could totally take out the virus before it really spreads. And the media was just like, absolutely not. Like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, maybe we should look into that. It was like, nope, we got to crack down on this now, because you're right. It was the politicization. Politicizing all of this.
Yeah, that one.
That caused it to just go, everyone went insane because they thought it would reflect poorly on Donald Trump.
Even if it saves one life, except if it helps Donald Trump, then screw all those people.
Yeah. All right, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. Follow us. I think we're going to try to do these live from here on out, assuming that this worked properly. If you would like, you could follow us on Twitter. Don't follow us on Twitter. It's socialist. Don't do it. You can send us your comments and questions, any feedback. Feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Nate Myers, you don't have a presence on social media, so just say goodbye to all the people.
Peace out, guys.
And Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me at JLakely on Twitter. You can also follow the Heartland Institute at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.